All right, can you guys hear me again? Let's see, sound is funky. He was sleeping earlier, but I wanted to show you guys this puppy we got. It's a puppy. This is Oakley, the golden retriever. He's our cute pie. Do you say hello? He's like, no, I'm gonna go back and have a little sleep. Life's hard.
He's so cute.
Thank you. We think so too. So it's been a wonderful addition to the family. Cute pie. He was too passed out earlier. He couldn't muster the energy to say hello. It's real hard being a puppy. All right. So here we are talking about statistical significance and what that looks like. We've talked about this before. Again, statistical validity, statistical significance is really stating, like mathematically, when you have a quantitative question, is the difference that you are seeing in numbers, or is the calculation that you got, right, about your variables, does it indicate, in fact, that there is something going on that is greater than just chance? That's the biggest piece. Uh-oh, this is going to be a problem if you're going to be chatty now. He's seeing his reflection and barking. Okay, I'm going to shoot a quick text over. Sorry, guys, I thought that'd be cute and fun, but now he's being loud. So that is the main issue with statistical significance. We want to make sure that the results we have are informing our hypothesis to either confirm it or refute it in a meaningful way, right? Otherwise, what do we have to go on? Nothing. Okay. That shouldn't be new to you guys, right? All of you have had stats, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do you guys remember talking about significance, statistical significance? Okay. All right. So we'll just leave it at that. I'm sure you guys get it. So when we start looking at correlations, we have to try to ask ourselves, is it actually significant? Now, specifically with this one, this is, again, social sciences. We're looking at smaller numbers. You guys, this is bad news. I should have not brought him downstairs at all because now I'm freaking out. I can't see him. Okay, let me stop my video for a hot minute. All right, everyone, sorry for the delay. Puppy made it all the way back upstairs. Okay, all right. So statistical significance. I was talking about that earlier with the social sciences and psychology. Anything that's really at that 0.3 value, you're going to make a big deal about that. It's going to be real exciting. So if you look here, you have the daily interaction variables, the reliability and correlations with well-being. And you can see, here's the overall, can you guys see my cursor? I'm on my other screen, maybe you can't. Well, okay, if you look here, it's just much smaller. It's the overall correlation with well-being and happiness specifically. And you can see here, the asterisk means that it is significant. If you look down here at the little footer, it says that it's significant at a 0.05 value. And if it's got two asterisks, here we are at negative 0.35, that's significant at a 0.01 value. So remember earlier we were talking about light, medium, and strong correlation. Even though this is only 0.27, based on the sample size, that would be considered statistically significant. When you are reporting your findings in a research paper or on a poster, that is the way you would do it, and you've likely seen it already in research articles. You put a little asterisk next to it. One asterisk usually means at 0.05, it's the greatest amount of potential error, right? Because this is saying we're 95% confident that we received this score and it is not due to error. It is in fact due to a bona fide relationship between the variables. And then you could do 2 asterisks, which shows 0 or 1 or smaller. And then sometimes you'll even see 3 asterisks, which is 0.001. So that's the way it's denoted in research articles and poster presentations. Okay, here we go. Now, is it possible for an outlier to impact the strength of the association? And the answer is of course. If you look right here, these are the same plots, but this outlier right here has been removed from this B example. So do you see the R value and how much it changes from 0.37 to 0.26? Then you can see here again, if you remove this outlier, that's really way out in the middle of nowhere, how much that impacts it. It goes from 0.49 to 0.15. So when you guys gather your data and you figure out what is it that we're measuring and how have people responded, if let's say you are looking at age of a respondent and their social media use, and you get an average age of, let's say, 21, but you have 2 outliers, 2 people's grandmas answered, and their age is in the 80s, and they have 0 social media use. I'm making stuff up here. Those outliers, it may be a good idea to take them out because it is going to be hard to generalize the numbers that you get from your study as to what is in fact the relationship between age and social media use if you've got somebody that's like 60 years older than the bulk of your sample. Does that kind of make sense? Are we tracking with that, with outliers? Yeah? Okay. Speak up if anything is like not clear. Definitely just let me know. Okay. Now, is there also a restriction of range? So here we see a score, right? This is college grade GPA and SAT score. Now you see here that you're right on that line here because GPAs start at 2.0 on here. So you are restricting the range. That means it's not the broad full scope of all possible range. It's been truncated. So that can be problematic in the way we display scores. So you can see here, if you restrict the range, it will impact the correlation. So if this is an ACT score in the college GPA, again, you've got from 1 to 4, but you restrict the range from 1800 to 2400, there's what looks like a smaller relationship, but they're showing here that really that restriction of range underestimates the true correlation between the two, because if you have the broad, like all of these values added here, which is much lower scores, right, then you get to see what is the relationship. Like it's going to be a stronger impact. Okay, now here's curvilinear. This is what I was telling you guys about earlier. I did mine in my example that went the other way. It was more shaped like an N. This is more shaped like a U. But this is the use of healthcare system and age. So again, when you're real little, maybe some of you guys have nieces, nephews, brothers and sisters, or you remember yourself, when you're little, you have to go to the doctor quite often. Shots, right? Like periodic check-in, 1-year checkup, 2-year checkup. But as you get older, your frequency of seeing medical doctors tends to drop as a whole. And as you get older, as you can see, it climbs right back up, right? So this would be considered a curvilinear relationship. So it is hard here. I mean, what would the slope be for this if you were to take a guess? Yeah, Tarshan, I think you're right. It would be a slope of 0. You'd probably have a straight line because these scores would kind of outweigh these scores, right? Like it's not going that way. It's not quite going that way. So talking about slope is not really relevant there. When you're talking about the relationship, it's more complex. It's not just binary. As one goes up, the other one goes up. You have to describe it. It's more rich, right? There's more data to consider. Okay. So when we look at bivariate analysis and we're looking at correlation, we want to make sure to look at causal criteria as well. This is something we've talked about earlier this semester. So the 3 causal criteria are covariance, how much the 2 variables you have at hand covary alongside one another, whether there's a directionality problem because of temporal precedence, this needs to happen first before that, and if there's actually internal validity within the variable, or if you're actually dealing with a third variable or some sort of confounding variable. So all of those need to be evaluated when you're taking a peek at correlations. So covariance, again, is do the results show that the variables are correlated, right? Covary, their level of variance mimic one another. Temporal precedence is a directionality problem, what I was just talking about. So the method that we're using to compare these variables, does it imply that one needs to happen before the other or vice versa? So if we don't know what happens first, then it's hard to infer any sort of causation. So if I think about, again, GPA scores in high school and then SAT scores, what would be the temporal precedence there? What do we think? High school GPA and SAT scores.
The high school GPA would probably come before test
Yeah.
score.
Yeah, absolutely. So your high school
For
GPA,
college tests.
yep, would likely come first, right? Or if you did it with SAT scores and college GPA, then SAT scores would come first. So it depends what are the variables you're looking at, and that will imply, and why do we care about temporal precedence? Well, because if my idea, my thinking is that the better a student does on the SATs, the better they'll do in college, if that's the premise I'm living with, then that's going to impact who I let into college possibly, right? There's going to be a causal impact to that. Or if I'm saying kids with high school GPAs score better on the SATs, then if I take it a step backwards, right, like from college performance back, then maybe I really need to focus on making sure students are getting strong GPAs in high school. And I need to look at how that's being measured and taught and all of that. So that has an impact on how we think about it. And then internal validity is to make sure that there's not some sort of plausible third variable that is either being a moderator or mediator or confounding effect on the other two. So is there something that is impacting that? So in my GPA and SAT example, what would be a possible third variable that would also impact SAT scores and high school GPA?
The amount of homework done,
Okay.
like in education.
Okay. So some sort of academic history or academic prowess and accomplishments. Yep. What would be something else?
Test anxiety.
Test anxiety. Okay, that's huge, right? If somehow you have really high test anxiety, that's going to impact your SAT score and quite likely your high school GPA score. Any other thoughts?
I was gonna say, maybe this, I guess, depending on like the sleep you got the night before.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe just overall preparation and like mental health and physical health the day of the tests, sure. What about income or socioeconomic status? Could that impact it? Yeah, I would say yes. Like the more money you make, maybe the greater access you had to tutors to get higher scores in classes, and maybe even access to like an SAT prep class to really prepare you for the SATs. So again, if we can find some other variable that has an impact on both, that may be a stronger correlation to the score than the two themselves, right? So I could say there's a relationship between GPA score and SAT score, but maybe there's an even stronger relationship with income. You know, I don't know. We'd have to see. Okay. So this is again, when is there a potential third variable or spurious association? We'll talk about that too. We could see here, there's the percentage of substantive conversation with a well-being scale. And these are reported as Z-scores. So you could see here, the percentage, the way it's all leveled out, you're seeing when it comes with the third variable. So let me read this piece here. How do we know if a third variable is posing a problem for internal validity? Just like I was describing earlier. So on the left, we see what would it look like if deep talk and happiness, okay, let me read that actually, because now I'm making no sense. So the study is about deep talk and happiness if education was a third variable responsible for the correlation between the two. So education is added as a third variable. So overall, you can see that there's a moderate positive relationship, right? If we were to take a line, it would go kind of right through here, right in this way. The more educated participants are represented by green dots. You can see them right here. Less educated by blue dots. And then we see the impact here of educated participants. They tend to score higher on both variables, and less educated participants tend to score lower. That just kind of is happening. So if we look at the level of education, that's maybe a better way to explain away the relationship between those variables, which is deep talk, how often you have a deep talk with your partner, and your level of happiness. So really, the only reason why the two are correlated is because education is part of it. So that is a spurious association problem. So this other scatter plot right here, again, we're looking at something a little bit different. So that's if you look at the green dots, the more educated one, separately, you see that there is still a positive association between deep talk and happiness. But if you look only at the blue dots, it's a little bit trickier to see, right? There's a positive correlation, but the level of education might be, again, accounted for in this situation. So it's stretched out to only include those. So you see how education is playing such a big role again. So this is just a way to represent it. Really, the take-home message here for you guys is whenever you're looking at relationship between two variables, it is important to ask yourself, could there be a third variable that has an even stronger relationship to each of those two that's kind of hidden behind the scenes? That would be more important to talk about than just the relationship between those two specific variables. Okay. Now, how important is external validity, which is how well we can generalize the findings that we got to other people, other groups, other regions, right? All of that. So externally. So when you look at that, I would say that is very important. We need to make sure that our studies are generalizable. Because again, like we talked about, a lot of our studies are done on available samples, college students representing all adults. So we want to make sure that the way the information is being presented and how it's being captured can generalize out to others. So if we look here, this is just an example again of how the two relate to one another. So this is again the multitasking score. We talked about this a little earlier in this class. And then the percent time spent multitasking. And what is the relationship between the two? So we care about that because then we want to be able to generalize that out to others as well. Okay, what is a moderator? That's a little bit, I used that word earlier when we were talking about that like C variable that's having an impact, but it's when there's a variable that its presence is going to impact the relationship between two other variables. So when an association between variables change, right, they're impacted depending on the level of a third variable, some other variable here. So if we look at the relationship between team success and game attendance, okay? So this is specifically for, I think it's a baseball team, if I remember correctly. And then we see, do they perform better when there's a lot of people in attendance for the sporting event? Again, this is pre-COVID, right? This study was done in 2007. Who knows what things would look like, again, with that. So the relationship between the two variables changes depending on the level of another, which is that moderator. So this is a correlation between professional sports game attendance and the success of a specific team. So we use multiple data points gathered over multiple Major League Baseball seasons, and we find that the teams, the cities that have high residential mobility, that there is a positive correlation between success and attendance, which shows kind of this fair weather fan. Like people, you guys know that term? Like you're supporting them when they're doing well. In cities where there's low residential mobility, there is not a significant relationship between success and attendance. So again, the degree of residential mobility then acts as a moderator. Now, what do we mean by residential mobility? That's how easy it is for people to move about the city to go from place to place. So maybe they have access to public transport, maybe things are closer, it's a more metropolitan, so it's easier for them to get from place to place, okay? So, and let's see it actually graphed out here. So this is, again, attendance and percentage of wins. So you see here in Arizona, where you're looking at, again, a mobility that is impacting it, you see a positive relationship. As they win, more people show up, fair weather fan. And then again, lower mobility, you don't see that. There's actually a negative relationship. So that's again showing that there's a third variable here, specifically residential mobility, that is impacting the relationship between attendance and percentage of wins. This would be very similar to, again, like we talked about, you know, level of income and GPA and SAT scores. Okay, here's another example of that. So gender can moderate the relationship between extroversion and group conversation. So this is the association here between extroversion specifically and the percentage of group conversation. So we see, again, the gender is having an impact. So what we see is extroversion isn't related to having a higher percentage of group conversations than men, but it is in women. So gender is moderating the association, again, between extroversion and group conversation. So that's impacting it that way. We've got another slide that describes something very similar again. When gender does not moderate the relationship alone, you see the numbers are far similar to one another. And then another example is the weekend or weekday status does not moderate the relationship between deep talk and well-being. So the day of the week is not a moderating effect on that relationship. Okay. Questions about bivariate correlation?
Yes, I'm just a little bit, I'm not concerned, but it's kind of fuzzy when you talk about like three variables. It's not fuzzy, but at the same time it is fuzzy, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like, I'm kind of used to like two variables, but then you're saying like a third variable can affect the way we look at like the whole thing overall.
Yes, so the idea is that whenever you're measuring just two variables, if you think about any two things you've ever measured in your life, there's obviously probably like 100 other things that are impacting it, right? So that's why in the survey that you guys are going to be deploying for this study, you're asking some demographic questions. For instance, you may ask male or female, you may ask how old they are, you may ask where they live, you know, other like bits and pieces of information. Because once you see what the score is on the survey, you're going to be able to create what's called post hoc analysis, meaning analysis after the fact that are not related to your hypotheses, to see, hey, is there actually a stronger impact between some of my demographic variables, something I didn't have a hypothesis about that, but is that actually impacting the relationship here that I suspected occurred between these two variables? So it's not that you're you're not like all of a sudden measuring a third variable. You have the data from demographic pieces and you're just parsing out. I mean, the idea of the Venn diagram there was really, it highlighted it pretty well because, yeah, obviously we want to be looking, oops, I don't know what I just did here. The ideal world is when you're looking at a correlation is that you just want to see this area, right? In the Venn diagram, you just want to see where it intersects. But we are not simple people, right? We're complex. So when you measure this one variable and you measure this one variable, these are actually impacted by lots of different things, right? So again, extroversion, measuring like how well you like being in groups, maybe has something to do with your culture, right? That culturally you were taught to be a certain way and others are different. And so the concept of extroversion may be very Americanized. For instance, I'm kind of going off on a deep end here. So it's not that you're specifically adding a third variable, you're just pausing and asking yourself, could there be another way for me to explain away the stats, the results that I got, aside from just the two variables? Did I make things clearer, harder to understand? What do you think, Darshana? Okay. Yeah. Main takeaway is that, again, we are complex, right? And any response you give on a survey, I think somebody earlier said this, like, well, maybe you didn't do well on the SAT scores because you didn't sleep at all the night before, right? So amount of sleep may in fact be more predictive or more related to a score on the SAT test than how well you practice, right? Like that had greater impact. But that wasn't your original idea. That wasn't what you were set out to measure. It's just once you got the results, you paused and thought through, like, let me look at the entire context, which is important to do because otherwise then we jump to conclusion. So one of the classic jokes I usually say, and I didn't say it this class, but it's like telling somebody there must be a strong correlation between having fires, like buildings on fire, and the presence of fire trucks. Now, why is that? Because when there's a fire, the fire department's called, fire trucks show up, right? We know that to be true. Logically, we know that that's true. But if I was looking at just, you know, a basic graph and trying to see a correlation, I might go into causation and go, every time I see a fire, there's fire trucks. Therefore, fire trucks might be causing the fires. When you have to pause and go, that's nonsense, right? Like, what is the relationship between the two? So whenever you look at two relationships, you want to see the entire context so you're making more sense of it. Does that help a little bit? Okay. Any other questions from you guys about this material? Otherwise, I just want to go over our schedule real quick. Did I skip a chapter, you guys? I think I did these out of order, but this made more sense to me today. So thank you for your grace. I want to just look over real quick. Okay, can you guys see my screen, which has the syllabus? Yes, okay. So this is what we did last week. We did the field trip. Field trip stuff was due this week. Make sure that you submit that to me. Somehow it should be on Course Connect. Just really made to be a short summary, just like you described in class today. This year, do not worry about the deadline of 7 p.m. Several of you have already sent me your reference sections. If you want to just have a few extra days or you need extra time, please do let me know. And then the big thing for next week is we're working on that literature review, kind of that introduction piece where you're going to be talking about the variable you're interested in and that you're going to be measuring throughout the class for the next several weeks. So make sure you talk about, again, like we talked about how to write a literature review. You're going to summarize, find the subheadings that have in common between your studies that make sense with what you're studying. Again, this is a writing project you guys are each doing on your own, even though you are in a group. You may have different hypotheses, you may have the same hypothesis. That's totally up to you guys. I've talked to a few groups that you guys are doing it differently, and that's fine. but it needs to be your own writing as to how you arrived to your hypothesis. So again, you are telling a story. You're walking us through what it looks like, specifically with your variables in mind and what the relationship is meant to be, so that once you get to your hypothesis section, I as a reader will go, oh, yeah, of course I see that, because you've just told me about this study that supported that, this study that supported that, and therefore this is what you hypothesize the relationship will be. Questions about that? Okay, just a heads up, this reference section should be straightforward. You just need to make sure that you have it in APA format. There's nothing hard. You're just literally making a reference list, but make sure it is in APA format. This bit is going to be probably the biggest chunk of writing you'll be doing. And then after that, the methods will be very simple. You'll just talk about what it is that you are surveying, what you're using for your survey, and then how you'll deploy it. So again, that's supposed to be straightforward. And then we are going to start sending out your surveys to your participants the first week of November. So make sure if you have questions about surveys, what to use, please do let me know. So looking ahead also, so next week, I don't know why sampling was here. I feel like that was out of order, but that's all right. We'll talk about multivariate correlation next time. And then the week after that, we're going to be doing group meetings. So we'll all gather together, and then we'll probably spend 30 minutes with each group seeing how I can help everyone. Okay, questions, comments, concerns? Or as I had another department head tell me, questions, comments, concerns, or rude gestures. I'm like, I'm not adding that to that list. No need rude gestures.
So our introduction is due next week.
Yes, that was a long-winded way for me to say that. Yes, thank you for, yeah. Okay.
Can my group ask our questions? Like,
Yeah,
I feel like I was a bad like representative, to like ask them. So could we like all talk to you after?
sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, if we're done, then you guys reach out if you have any questions for me. Otherwise, I'll plan on staying on, and then your group, Bridget, can just stay on. I'll stop screen sharing. Have a great night, everyone. Stay warm. It's gotten cold. Bye-bye.
Can I ask a quick question before their group talks?
Yeah.
Can I have I think I gotta get like maybe like 4 more articles. So can I just turn in like by the end of tonight or tomorrow morning? Is that okay?
For your references?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's not a problem.
So do I email it to you or do we turn that in on Course Connect?
No, turn it on Course Connect. If you're having any issues with that, then you can always email it, but Course Connect is a little simpler.
Okay. Thank you.
Course
No problem.
Connect says it's due on the 21st, and it's not accepting submissions until the 20th.
Why is Course Connect bad? You
That's
guys,
why I was confused. I was like, I didn't even finish my reference list because I thought it was.
Right. So I was just like, uh-oh. When I seen that, I was
started
it was
it.
due today.
Shoot.
so you know what ended up happening is that all of these dates are messed up because today's the 14th and the references are like for the 15th. So I think somehow when this course was copied over from last time, this has been like the hill I'm gonna die on here. Okay, let's see if I can. Let's go back. Hold on, guys. I think I'm gonna put on turn editing on. Okay. Sorry. Edit. Oh, there is hope. Okay. I think it should be okay. Can one of you try it? Is there a quick way to try it?
look and see if it'll allow me to turn it in.
In that case, is it okay if I just turn mine in like tomorrow?
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, unless you guys have not noticed due dates, I'm not losing sleep over that.
Okay.
I'm not
I'll get it
docking
as soon as I have
people.
it done.
Nah.
It still says the due date is October 21st.
But it will
Mhm.
let you send in submissions. I just
Yeah.
checked as well.
Okay,
It
yeah.
will or will not?
It will let you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I-
I thought it was next week.
I do not think I know how to change the due date because that's in administrator settings, but I just turned off the don't submit. Okay, let's just try that. Okay, does that work, Tarshana?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
No problem. All right, how can I help your team?
We have sent you emails. Sam and I both sent you an email with our survey like
You did.
2 weeks ago. And we haven't gotten an email back about whether or not our questions are good or if we should make any changes or anything.
Then it sounds like it did not get to me. Okay, so let's see here. Grace.
My email is grj001 in case you have to search for it.
Oh, I did get this email from Samantha about COVID. Was it related to employment? You did not get my response though.
I didn't.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah, I was like trying to look for it, but I didn't get anything.
Yeah.
That's okay.
No, so there I had two comments. One, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's not coming up on my phone. I think if I'm remembering correctly, you had some questions that had 4 options and others that only had 2. Is that possible?
I can look at it really quick right now.
Yeah, that would be great.
Let me see.
So mostly with tests, since you guys are
Oh.
creating your own survey, we want to try to be consistent. And when you look at surveys that have already been standardized and peer reviewed, they will all have the same number of options. Like it'll all be on a Likert scale, like strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree, or something like that. Now, if you're asking questions like, how old are you? And you're brought, that's fine. But like for the specific questions, if you're trying to see a total score, I guess that was my question too. Like, is there going to be a total score that you're adding up and giving a numerical value? Or are you just going to divide it in half? Like, if people said these 2 responses, they get, 1, and like, how are you going to code it? Those are my questions.
That's a good question.
Okay. Does that apply? Am I thinking of the right survey?
I'm looking at our survey and there are 2 questions with either yes or no answers.
Okay.
So, and they're about have you found social media to be beneficial to your mental health and to your physical health?
Okay.
So maybe we should just change that to like very beneficial, just beneficial, neutral, not beneficial, or very not beneficial.
Yeah, or make it a statement. I have found social media to be beneficial during COVID. Strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. So if you make them statements instead, rather than questions, then you can anchor it with a strongly disagree to strongly agree.
Okay.
I don't know if you can do that for all of them. I want to say you had some about like, did you ask about length of employment or something? Like you can't do agree with that.
Oh, we
But
did like employment status before COVID and then during COVID.
And what is your research question then? Does it have to do with that?
It's about social media usage. I think that
Also, like, we were also going to talk to you because I mean, I know I was looking for references and stuff for like what we were planning on doing. And then Grace was also, but we weren't finding things that were like directly about what we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that we might need to like shift our idea a little bit so that like the reference, because I honestly could not find like anything about like the usage of social media during COVID. Like,
So for sure, you're not going to find anything on that. So we need to make it broader. So I
yes.
would say maybe instead social media as it benefits people during a health crisis. I know there's probably going to be stuff on there like cancer patients or, again, it's going to be a little different, but or social media use post-trauma. So again, it's talking about the benefits of social media when somebody's experiencing something really tough, which we could insert and posit that COVID is very tough.
Right.
So I would take a look at that, like just social media and social support. There's going to be a ton on that. So even if you keep it broad that way, and then you can infer that during COVID, there's going to be a similar need. But then I would think about the questions, since you guys are creating your own questionnaire, which is always a little dicey. I would maybe instead guide you towards finding a social media benefit scale, like positive impact of social media or the social support and social media. And there's definitely going to be surveys on that. And then at the front end, you can ask questions about COVID, and those can be part of your demographic questions.
Okay. That helps.
So, yeah, so then you could say like, I have felt emotionally impacted by COVID. Strongly disagree, all that. I have had physical impairment because of COVID. Strongly disagree. I've had emotional impairment because blah, blah, blah. And then you compare that with social media use and social connectedness, and then see the link.
Okay. Okay.
When will we be sending out the survey?
That'll be in November. So probably that first week of November. So next week we're still lecturing. The week after that, we're doing group work like this to make sure everyone's on the same page and we know exactly what your survey is going to look like, where you're going to be sending it, and then we're deploying it.
Okay.
So honestly, it could even be like October 29th, like right after we have our class meeting. But by November 4th for sure.
Okay.
Which is our next class meeting. Does that help? I'm very sorry that somehow we had a glitch. Whenever you're like, it's been over a day and she's not responded, definitely don't hesitate to text me. I teach for 4 universities and I work full time, and then the kids. So I get like 200 emails a day. So if I see it and I think I've replied and I didn't, I'm very sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? So take a look at that, the social media and social support. I think that would be really helpful as keywords to find a survey that already exists.
All right. Cool.
Okay. All right, gang. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.